Welcome to Richmond, Virginia. The capital of the Old Dominion, when it comes to urban discussion, goes under the radar. You'll hear a lot about, and rightly so, the Virginia suburbs of DC, such as Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax, which have undergone a lot of development over the past few decades. And with the substantial expansion of the Washington Metro, this area has been one of the only highly populated places in the US, perhaps the only one, that has undergone significant transit-oriented development. But Richmond certainly deserves attention in this regard too. It may be a smaller city, and it has its fair share of sprawling car-centric suburbs, but the urban core of Richmond is one of the most historic, walkable, and beautiful in the US. The neighborhoods that immediately surround downtown, especially from the west side, such as the Fan and Museum districts, are some of the most expansive, classically planned neighborhoods that you'll find anywhere in the country. Beautiful homes, corner stores, local high streets, small blocks, narrow roads, and traditional architecture. It may be a bit rough around the edges, as the modernists had their best attempts at infiltrating this rare gem, but most of it remains intact, and it's just so impressive how extensive this part of the city is. Though it is a shame that the downtown was mostly bulldozed and replaced by modernist garbage, these surrounding neighborhoods more than make up for that. Even the further out suburbs of Colonial Place, Willow Lawn, Brooklyn Park, Highland Park, and the West End are great examples of American suburbs at their very best. They have large homes with front lawns and backyards, but the blocks are small, the streets are narrow, and the land use is as efficient as possible, which allows for there to still be neighborhood cafes, restaurants, bars, parks, medical clinics, and schools within walking distance, and urban high streets, all of which with tons of high-quality architecture. But despite all these great neighborhoods, there are still miles and miles of car-centric urban sprawl surrounding Richmond, to the point where new suburbs are being built 15 to 20 miles out of downtown. And for a city with an urban population of just over 1 million, that's pretty ridiculous and completely unsustainable. And so Richmond has recently had a major development push in a bid to drive new residents back toward the urban core. So today, let's look at some notable projects that have been built over the past few years, what's currently under construction, and what's being discussed for the near future. Now let's get into it. Let's start with downtown. There have been tons of new buildings that have risen in and around downtown over the past several years, and so I'll list a few. And bear in mind, these all replace either surface parking or just empty lots. You have the 67-unit Jackson Ward Affordable Housing Development. You have the 154-unit Jackson Place. There's 166-unit Mixed Use The Penny. There's also the Mixed Use 168-unit Park View at Commonwealth. There's the 237-unit Mixed Use Locks Tower, as well as the Mixed Use Main 2525 project with its 216 residential units, and the 180-unit Shiplock Views. There's also the Mixed Use 138-unit One Canal, and easily my favorite from an architectural standpoint, the 21-unit Fauci Muse. But there's also the Virginia General Assembly building, which was once this very beautiful neoclassical building attached to a very ugly brutalist building. But now, the neoclassical building has been kept, but the brutalism has been completely replaced by an extension of the neoclassical design, and this has turned out to be a greatly successful project. Well done, Richmond. There are also 4 projects under construction. There's the CoStar Center for Arts and Innovation that is replacing what was a surface parking lot. There's also the VPM building, a Richmond-based media organization, building their new HQ where, yet again, there is a surface parking lot. On the shores of the James River will be the Allianz Amphitheater, which will make for a great downtown destination, and right across the street from there, atop of what was an empty plot, will be the high-rise CoStar building, which will service the commercial real estate company's corporate campus. Just north but cut off from downtown by I-64 is Gilpin, a small neighborhood made up of mid-20th century public housing, which immediately indicates that these are structures of low quality and simply does not provide high quality of life to its residents, which explains their 25% vacancy rate and why it is scheduled to be completely redeveloped. The proposal is to rebuild this neighborhood with a mix of housing types, ranging from mixed-use, medium-density apartments to townhomes to low-density homes, with an emphasis on walkability and seemingly leaning towards more traditional styles, meaning that hopefully the final project will be quite beautiful. The few renderings that have already been made look extremely promising, and while it may not be perfect, it is certainly something to get excited about. There is a lot of talk of building a bridge deck over I-64 in order to reconnect the neighborhood with the rest of Richmond, which is the core of the issue that led to this neighborhood's decline. Where you'll find even more development is in the neighborhood opposite downtown on the southern side of the James River, Oldtown Manchester. Like so many other inner city neighborhoods in this country, Oldtown Manchester once was plagued by empty lots and lifeless streets. But there has been an onslaught of development here for years now, including large apartment complexes in the neighborhood urban center, as well as numerous townhomes and small lot homes on the residential streets. And we're talking about dozens and dozens of new homes and apartments where there were empty lots not that long ago. For a once ravaged inner city neighborhood, this is pretty rare to see and should be commended. Under construction here is the 70-unit Maury Street townhomes, replacing a truck and trailer repair, the 235-unit Plant Zero redevelopment, replacing an industrial building, the 211-unit mixed-use Samson Coatings apartments, also replacing industrial buildings, the whopping 533-unit Avery Hall Towers, also replacing an industrial building, the 40-unit Manchester Square project, the 116-unit Manchester income-based apartments, the 32-unit Manchester townhomes, and this doesn't even cover everything that's being built at the moment. And remember, this is on top of all the new construction that has already taken place. How many other neighborhoods in America have essentially rebuilt themselves at such a scale so quickly from the inside out? Going west but north of Broad Street, which is the main east-west thoroughfare between downtown Richmond and its west side neighborhoods, are neighborhoods and districts that have been car-centric, mainly industrial areas, but are where the city is putting most of its effort into reforming and is where a lot of development has taken place and will continue to into the near future. You see this in neighborhoods like Harvard and Newtown West, with the under construction The Guild replacing a surface parking lot with 301 housing units, the Porter replacing this industrial building and its parking lot with 314 housing units, the 388-unit West Lay Apartments atop this undeveloped piece of land, the mixed-use 295-unit The Ace replacing these industrial buildings, the mixed-use 117-unit 2929 Clay, and the mixed-use 116-unit 2925 The Marshall, all of which are replacing industrial buildings and parking lots. And I could be here all day listing off all the recent buildings completed in this neighborhood, replacing lowly industrial buildings and surface parking with hundreds of apartment units and retail. And a really cool thing about this transformation is that thankfully the street grid is already mostly small blocks of narrow roads, meaning the transition from mostly industrial into a residential and commercial neighborhood should actually be quite smooth and result in a fairly well-functioning, walkable neighborhood. We've talked on this channel before about South End Charlotte, another former industrial area transforming into a neighborhood, but that the large car-centric blocks of its industrial past are too large and don't lend itself well for walkable neighborhood use. But no such problem will occur here in Richmond. There are also a bunch of huge projects planned for this area, for example the 367-unit Moore Street mixed-use project, the 320-unit Dairy Bar redevelopment, the 203-unit Scott's Edge Phase 2, and the mixed-use Sauer Center, which plans on becoming a whole new neighborhood center unto itself over in Newtown West, which has some pretty spectacular renderings. But then you get into the Diamond District, which is where you get the most extensive master plan project in Richmond. These 123 acres of former industrial uses are going to be completely redeveloped into a brand new neighborhood and athletic center. There will be a brand new baseball stadium, an athletic center for Virginia Commonwealth University, a bridge that better connects this area to nearby neighborhoods for pedestrians, as well as 1,700 new residential units across mixed-use buildings. A final design for what these buildings will ultimately look like still hasn't been chosen, though there are definitely better concepts than others. Ideally, what they choose should be classically beautiful and make for a walkable, community-oriented neighborhood, and it seems that at least the latter will be guaranteed. It also appears that these buildings will feature at least some courtyard blocks, which is quite encouraging, as that means that hopefully families will also be attracted to the new neighborhood rather than just individuals. Either way, this massive project is bound to bring in thousands of new residents into the city and helps to further expand Richmond's urban core. Let's see what happens over the coming years once they finally decide on a final design. Meanwhile, the athletic facilities have already begun construction. There are a couple other ongoing projects of note. The former Virginia National Guard building, plus the parking lot of this elementary school, is going to be a new housing development with 125 homes, plugging in this gap in the northern neighborhoods adjacent to downtown. In Creighton, another neighborhood close to downtown, you have the former Glenwood Golf Course being converted into 290 new homes. And just south of that, you have the Creighton Court public housing development, another mid-century dilapidated project being redeveloped into a mixed housing type neighborhood, similar to that being proposed for Gilpin, with 700 housing units, and following in the footsteps of the nearby Armstrong Renaissance when that was recently completed with its 256 housing units. And a quick mention to this suburban project about 4 miles out of downtown, which, due to the sprawling nature of Richmond's suburbia, is actually relatively close to the city center. Here, another large public housing complex has been torn down decades ago, and this area remained abandoned for years. But now, as construction has been ongoing for the past 10 years or so, this has become its own suburban town center called Libby Mill Midtown, with apartments, retail, a town plaza, a park, and some denser townhome neighborhoods surrounding. There is a lot of surface level parking, and the new townhome neighborhoods are very asphalt heavy, but compared to what is standard for these suburbs, this is pretty great and continues to normalize certain good urbanist practices in new construction, even in deep suburbia. And so while Richmond is certainly guilty of its own super sprawling, land-grabbing suburbs, it is taking a lot of action to bringing development back to its core, and redevelop where it can and should, which is how Richmond has been able to increase its population by 30,000 since 2010 after decades of decline. And with large-scale development projects set to take place in the near future, such as the one in Gilpin and the rest of the Diamond District, Richmond is hopefully going to continue down this upward trajectory, especially if the city starts to embrace even more classical architecture, and perhaps then the rest of the country will finally take notice of what is truly an iconic and beautiful city. And with that, thank you for watching, I'll see you next time. And now a shout out to my incredible supporters on Patreon: Sven Weisbrod, Grandpa Allen, Jean Baptista, Ruben Hansen, Cameron Dennis, James Whale, Michael Goldman, Ulysses Arnold, Joseph, Roach, Eric Martz, Fortunate Calf, VJ Mari, Jerome Frolich, Nicholas Tobichuk, and my dad.